Yay, I made it to the Eternal Palace ride. I heard it's the first ride that just uses water. This is going to be awesome and nothing is going to go wrong.
It's the Zot's world after all. It's the Zot's world after all.
Yeah, that is the sauce for right now. Yes, this is
Hey, you've been staring at nothing for like the past 10 minutes. We're gonna start the show, so if you're good, come on over. Let's get started.
I feel
corrupted.
Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly, the show where I dismiss your concerns while riding high on the Shill Mount Express. It's almost the end of week 2 of patch 8.2, and we've been spending all this time on preparation that I'm sure that many of us have been grinding away at. I mean, look at this. This is a screenshot from 12 p.m. Pacific on a Wednesday, but you know what? It's really nice to see a lot of lively activity, at least, for the time being. All of this rushing is, of course, because of next week when Season 3 begins, when the real patch content opens up, like the Mythic Plus and the PvP season. I mean, that's just around the corner, as well as the entry to the Mechagon Dungeon and Ashara's Eternal Palace. By the way, Bob, you took a trip down there to the raid's entrance. Like, how was it?
So, I have seen so much. I know the universe.
You sound different.
I know. I have evolved. I have seen 1,000 truths. I have the tentacles to prove it. Bend over.
No, I'm gonna do the news. Let's go. First off, some classic news. The closed beta test for WoW Classic will shut down on July 12th, a little over 6 weeks before the official launch on August 27th. For those of you who haven't been keeping up, the closed beta allowed for a level cap of 40, but it still allowed for a large amount of classic content to be tested. This has left some fans who wanted to go as far as testing endgame dungeons and raids a little bit disappointed. After all, this sort of testing has been typical of recent WoW expansions and their more inclusive alphas and betas. But testing WoW Classic isn't like the other expansions. Beyond looking for stability and bugs, the goal of testing Classic isn't to give feedback on whether or not the experience or the content is good, it's already done. So instead, we're looking at whether the experience is the same as it was before. Depending on the perspective, I could say that the closed beta testing contributed very little to almost nothing when it comes to serving the quality of the product, and instead it fulfilled a couple of purposes. One was to find functional and compatibility bugs. Is WoW Classic going to work on our system? Are there crashes happening? Are there things about the UI just not working right? But one of the really big goals, I think, was to give an environment of semi-organic advertising in the form of streamers and content creators. And another was to just establish an overall presence and keep World of Warcraft in the news cycle. The real testing for WoW Classic came in the form of the stress test when it came to testing out this multi-region hardware and fine-tuning this whole layering technology, which is new, and it's crucial to delivering a good experience without recreating the mistake that Blizzard made early on with deploying dozens and dozens of servers to suit demand. That's just my opinion though, but to their credit, Blizzard did in fact meet the goal. WoW Classic hype is at a high, and there's still an upcoming stress test for all regions later this month on July 25th and 26th. So if you're able to get in, get in. Check things out. Break stuff. Break a server and brag about it. Also, on what I think is a bright bit of news, WoW Classic is going to launch separate realms for people in the Oceanic region, bringing a big sigh of relief to our friends down over there, and to us, because we don't have to deal with their lag. On the European side, there's some more good news. Classic is going to launch with realms specifically labeled for the French and German language, on top of the already announced English and Russian designated realms. I think that this is something that Blizzard was prepared to react to, and it was just a matter of listening to feedback after the initial announcement. This also kind of sort of tells me that Blizzard isn't quite sure how well received WoW Classic is going to be, at least in the long run. Maybe they predict that after a few months, as the population swells and then contracts, that maybe the populations will be a bit too fractured among 4 languages instead of just 2. So going forward with these 4 languages, it's just going to be left up to the players to figure out what to do if their realm happens to be dead. Well, what do you think, Bob?
Of many thoughts are truths and lies. The stag's horns will pierce the veil.
What the hell? Okay, anyway, so Season 3 is going to start next week. Let's see how the Alliance are doing in the crucible of, oh my god, the horror. This is very irresponsible for me, this is just kind of coming off the top of my head, but is Crucible of Storms even restricted by this whole, hey, you gotta get 100 guilds on the Horde and Alliance side to complete their Hall of Fame in order to unlock Cross-Realm Mythic? If that's the case, wow.
1,000 maws have opened and devoured hope, fulfilling the promise of Nightmare.
I guess what Bob means is that if Cross-Realm Mythic does open for Crucible of Storms, it's gonna be out of pity, and not because of what the players did. This brings up a hypothetical. Crucible of Storms is one of those weird raid spots where in the face of Titan Forging, unfortunately it didn't turn out to be a very fulfilling experience, although I really blame the timing. It came in the middle of a season, and it just didn't offer anything that was worth the good old Mythic effort. But what about later, right? What if somewhere down the line there's a new patch and there's a new raid, many months pass, but one faction, the Alliance, does not even manage to get even 100 guilds to fulfill their end of the Cross-Realm Mythic bargain? What happens? That'd be pretty embarrassing, both for the Alliance and for Blizzard, because the imbalance between the factions when it comes to the raiding population just got that bad. To be clear, I'm not all that worried about this today. It did take a full month longer than the Horde for the Alliance to clear the Mythic Hall of Fame for Battle of the Dazar'alor, but that was all the way back in April, and now we're in July. I don't see a scenario where at least 100 guilds, whether it's Horde or Alliance, is not able to clear a raid before the next one comes up, because that's many months from then. The fear, it does cross my mind. Problem is though, I don't see a great fix for this in the long run unless we do something extreme like, oh, I don't know, blurring or dissolving the faction lines altogether.
Upon the altar, the horse lies still, but shifts with every strike.
Yeah, thanks for the creepy dead horse reference. Before we get into 8.2, let's do the what of the week, where I scour the internet for some WoW-related insanity, and I effortlessly find it. This one is a post on the WoW subreddit with this very picture and the following caption. Spare parts and other Mechagon materials should go to currency tab. This is getting ridiculous. What? And when I mean what, I mean, dude, your inventory looks terrible.
And yet your inventory looks like the circle of stars threw up.
Hey, at least you're getting a little bit of that zest back, yeah. Bob's right though, it takes one to know one, and 8.2 with 2 fully featured zones fills up your inventory with stuff really fast. The Reddit thread proceeded to roast the crap out of this guy. The top comment pointed out all sorts of problems with the OP's bag, like having extra reagents, gray items, way too much food, even having what looks like those secret finder monocles. There's 4 of them. What are you still doing with those? And yet this guy wants spare parts and crates to be on a currency tab. Give me a break. This is the kind of guy that if you gave him more bag space, he would just find more crap to stuff in there and then complain about needing more bag space. To be fair, there are a great deal of items to collect that are considered currencies. You gotta manage and keep track of things like spare parts, crates, oscillators, empty and filled energy cells, igniter coils, recycling parts, and I'm just talking about Megagon Island. But I'm also talking about things that can all be stuffed into your reagent bank. The World of Warcraft is meant to be an adventure into new lands with scary stuff to kill for loot, and you pick up a bunch of stuff. You should be prepared. But don't be that person who packs a thermos and a cooler full of food and a change of clothes when you're just going to the post office. That's not being prepared. That's being my mom. So let's follow up on last week's post-launch feedback for patch 8.2. Looking back over the past week has been nothing short of intense if you're trying to maximize your gains and be on top of the race towards obtaining flight, which people started obtaining early this week. But if you're not the type who's all about rushing through content and could care less about being pressured to do anything that you don't want to, then hey, you know what? Sit back, relax on that chair or that toilet you're sitting on because you've already beat the game. Over these 10 or so days since the launch of the patch, there has been a massive amount of information that's been uncovered by the community. Sources for reputation, hidden items, methods for unlocking rares, and how to make your apron turn black.
Riveting. You wear the corrupted threads of revelation.
So let's talk about rares. They've been a source of treasure and awe and agony and wowhead traffic. So far, they've been the bread and butter of this patch, thanks to the very cool and powerful rewards like a recipe to make a rocket pack and boosts for your beloved combat allies. And by combat allies, I'm talking about Poen for the Horde. Like, you could call him Poen or you can call him Pone. Yeah, if it was like 2002, that would be funny. Even as someone who took strides to explore the nooks and crannies of how 8.2 operates and have the audacity to write a guide about it, I was absolutely floored with everything that I missed and all these different things, all these different rares that we're dealing with. I mean to say that I am pleased. I liked how rares work in 8.2 and I like how Blizzard has been handling some of the issues around them. So here's what we've encountered. We've been encountering rares that rotate in and out, most notably the rares that would spawn when a daily certain quest was available over in Mechagon. There are rares that could be activated. Among those include the Doppelgang over in Mechagon, as well as the 4 epic trees in Nazjatar. They just have some really inventive ways to open them up. One of these trees had me climb up a cliff and then fly off, hit a manta ray, land back on the cliff, and then kite this manta ray, this big 11 million HP manta ray, all the way over to some giant tree. And then I kill the manta ray on top of the giant tree wakes up, gets pissed off, and then tries to kill me. It's not super off the wall, but it's just awesome. There are ones that would activate when I spawned a battle pet on top of them. There was one that drops this red murloc pet where I needed to spawn it at a specific place by shooing away a murloc, getting this 10-minute debuff, and then just kind of waiting there because murlocs would continuously spawn on top of me, and it took about half an hour until one of those random spawns happened to be the rare that I was trying to hunt for. And of course there are rares that you just camp. And you ask general chat, hey, when did the last rust feather spawn? And then chat would say, oh, about 15 minutes ago. And you'd be like, okay, thanks. And then you keep circling around the island for a little while. Consider that the vast majority of rares that spawned in 8.0 just appeared. And then you killed them and they would reappear a few minutes later. Now take a deep breath and just appreciate the current variety that we enjoy. What these rares dropped was just as interesting. Helpful recipes, reputation tokens that would save days of farming, pearls for upgrading gear. This is what I think some players were really itching for, a stick and carrot that felt mostly transactional but was pretty interesting. Yeah, sure, I mean, rares are rares. They have a spawn time, you gotta camp for them, sometimes you miss out and you have to wait. And sometimes you didn't quite know how long it would take until the next opportunity for this rare would arise. So you chill there, you hang out with others who are camping. Maybe you're in a group and you're sweeping the land and you're letting each other know when something pops. And the world feels kind of alive. Or you could say that rare camping is a form of time gating and prolonging subscriptions if you wanna drive that narrative. But this whole thing of rare farming is not for everyone though. There were moments where I would stand around trying to research something, and then in the meantime, I would see people zipping by in their rocket packs, running and chasing for the next thing. One moment you would see a message saying that someone spawned and here are the coordinates, and immediately after, the words that you would just hate to see, oh, it's dead. It's fast. Maybe too fast. I underestimated just how fervent and hungry players have become. Now imagine if phasing and sharding didn't exist. Like, what would the most crowded or the most dead realms be like? On the average though, rares have been dying a bit too quickly, and as I predicted, Blizzard did step in and buff rare mob HP depending on how many people are attacking it. And that's good. A few extra seconds of me having to hammer on a rare is worth it, if that also means I'm not going to be on the other end of it where I'm chasing and I'm just 1 second too late before that mob is dead. How many times has that happened to you? Yeah, that's what I thought. And if that hasn't happened to you at all, either you're not hunting for rares or you need to stop popping cooldowns. That's really messed up. So I'm pretty happy with rares, but on the other end of the happiness spectrum, let's talk about the Battle for Nazjatar event. As a quick reminder, I play on the Horde side. So I talked about my concerns last week that super imbalanced war mode shards made the battle not very fun. Obviously the losing side has no chance of winning, but even the winning side didn't quite win. They needed to have one PvP kill on their belt during the event in order to get credit. But people couldn't find anyone to kill over on the losing side because the losing side was losing. They had no chance of winning, so more often than not, they would just leave. So Blizzard devised a solution and deployed this just the other day. Instead of activating the PvP event on a timer, the game would first check to see if a particular war mode shard was balanced, and then one of two things would happen. If the realm was balanced, the battle for Nazjatar would begin. Woohoo! But if the war mode shard wasn't balanced, well then the game would spawn Naga commanders, even in war mode, and that is a pretty dismal amount of Nazjatar commendations to get. The result of this change, at least from my observations, is that I have yet to see the Battle for Nazjatar event happen since. Balanced war mode shards are fine, cool, you just need to find them somehow. As for everyone else, the Battle for Nazjatar is effectively over. And that sucks, because I can't do anything about it. That's not fun. So as a reaction to this change, this doesn't feel like an actual fix. This is just more like a crappy consolation prize for the many imbalanced war mode shards that are out there. This isn't a fully fleshed out thought, but I'm going to throw my hat in there. This is what I suggest Blizzard can do, either for the Battle for Nazjatar or for a future world PvP event if it's similar to this. First thing to do is to just lift that whole honor kill restriction. I get that it's not hard to earn one, but it's also extremely hard to earn one because it entirely depends on if the opposite faction or the losing faction is even present. It's more than possible to contribute to the battle by capturing a node early on, but then never have the battle come to you, so it makes your efforts feel wasted. And I don't think it's good gameplay to compel you to leave your post and go out hunting for the sake of hunting and getting credit, because you're supposed to guard the flag, hello? The real change, though, needs to come from just how the Battle for Nazjatar activates in the first place. Right now it's on a timer, and when time's up, the game logic decides whether to start the battle or to spawn commanders. Instead, why not put something in that lets the players, or let player actions decide? So here's one idea. If you're in the war mode version of Nazjatar, and only the war mode version, there's an NPC there. And this NPC makes you an offer. It's like, hey champion, do you wanna whoop some ass? And if you do, you get queued up for this kind of special thing as if it were a battleground, but not. When enough Horde and Alliance queue up for this, then they're prompted to enter the battle. All of a sudden, they're put into a special war mode shard that's designed pretty much for the Battle for Nazjatar. From there, there's no requirement for a first kill, and all participants are going to get a reward based on if they won or lost. That's it. And in case you're wondering if you can farm the crap out of this all day, no, there should be some sort of debuff or a cooldown that prevents you from farming this stuff too fast. Something like this can work, but at the same time, I'm a big fan of natural world PvP and having it escalate into something more, so this is not going to be a good idea, but how about this? Instead of taking a measure of how balanced a war mode shard is before deciding whether or not to start this Battle for Nazjatar, why not do some sort of measurement to see how much actual PvP is going on that shard? I'm not going to dive too deep on the details or the specifics, but imagine if the battle only started when there was a certain number of honor kills that were made by both factions within a certain time frame, kind of like a heat measurement. And once that heat measurement reached a certain level, that would just kick off the battle. So think of it like this. You walk into the zone and some NPC tells you immediately, hey, the battle is going well, we control the region, but be on your guard. So that kind of tells you that you're part of the dominant faction, whether you outnumber the enemy on that particular shard or if you guys are just PvPing harder than they are. But what might it be like on the non-dominant faction? Perhaps when that person walks into the zone, an NPC once again will tell them a message, but in this case it'll tell them, oh no, our forces are being pushed back. Show them what happens when our backs are against the wall. And that faction, the non-dominant faction, is going to get a buff called Back to the Wall. Sure, it's a PvP buff. It makes all characters in that zone a little bit stronger. perhaps a little bit more confident, maybe a little bit more bold. But the point isn't so that the non-dominant faction, aka the Alliance, just has this permanent buff all the time. It's just a way to encourage killing between both factions. But once enough killing happens on both sides, then the battle for Nazjatar can begin. Once it does begin, everyone present gets credit. You don't need to do that first kill thing. The non-dominant faction, maybe they can still have that buff, maybe it can go away as soon as the battle begins, but even then there's a pretty high likelihood that that faction could still lose. But at the same time, we can still at least participate in the battle. Everyone's getting a little bit of reward because everyone has been fighting. If you haven't noticed, this is the typical direction that I like taking when it comes to promoting World PvP. The reward for killing should be the opportunity for more killing. Fighting in Nazjatar and escalating the conflict inside should spark off the battle for Nazjatar. Naturally, not on a timer, and that would be followed by all these cool rewards that you are trying to fight over. Having the battle start based on how many just bodies are there isn't really a great measurement of participation. It's just a measurement of who's there. I know that this idea that I had has all sorts of other problems too, so don't go ahead and knock it down if you want. I'm not going to try to defend it, but I'm just trying to throw my thoughts out there. So that's going to wrap it up for today, but next week, it's coming. It's coming. Not Season 3, you already know. Season 3 is coming, but this is a reminder that next week, the Eternal Palace cinematics are going to release. I don't know how many there are going to be, but I can almost guarantee you that it's going to be the most talked about thing throughout the week. Forget the Battle of Nazjatar, forget about the new raid and dungeon. No one's talking about that mount thing anymore.
Forget what you know to be true, for all words are both truth and lies.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about a cinematic, man.
Well, okay then.
Oh, welcome back, Bob. As for the rest of you, thanks for coming. Consider supporting the channel as a patron because, hey, you're already great, but you might as well let everyone know by getting your name up on some video somewhere on the internet. Otherwise, do what you do best, and I'll see you folks next week for some more shenanigans and some more 8.2. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.